You're listening to The Loop, a podcast by Mosaic Church. The goal? To know Jesus a little better so we can live like him a little more. And now, here's today's host, Wes Feldner.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another fantastic episode of The Loop. I've got some awesome friends in the studio with me today. Let's do this. Just to kick things off, I'd love to just go around the table. Tell everybody who's watching who you are and what your involvement is here at Mosaic. So I'm going to start. Obviously, I'm Wes. I'm one of the pastors here at the church. I lead worship at the Ocean Springs campus, and that's how I'm connected here.
I am Sam Newman, and I am just a volunteer, and I lead worship here at Ocean Springs sometime as well.
That's right.
I'm Kaelyn Floyd. I'm kind of new around here. My husband is the youth pastor here at Mosaic, and so I lead alongside of him in our youth ministry as a volunteer, and then I also lead worship as a volunteer.
Perfect.
And I'm Matt Wood. I am a pastor here at Mosaic at our Harrison County campus. I'm the worship pastor there. And I started out as a volunteer here about 2-3 years ago.
That's right. Awesome. I love having you guys around the table. Thanks so much for being here for this episode. So we are kicking off a brand new series called Worship. It's More Than You Think. So what I'd like to do is just start things off with a question here. Feel free to chime in and respond. To start, how would each of you define worship beyond just the music that we experience on the weekends here at Mosaic?
I would define worship as just an opportunity to interact with God Almighty. And through that interaction, have the ability to experience a sensation that deepens the joy and the highs of life, but also helps to make the sorrows of life more bearable. So that's how I would define it.
That's good. That's deep, man. What else?
That's good. I think for me, the way that I think I engage in worship outside of the four walls of church would be through relationship. So I literally was studying this passage the other day. John 15 verse 8 talks about the way that we glorify the Lord is through producing fruit and proving to be his disciples. And then literally the next verse is, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God and love one another. And he talks about how he shares his personal name with us, Yahweh, and it proves that he is our friend. And so all in that passage, the Lord has shown us that friendship is really important to him, that loving one another is really important, and those are ways that you produce fruit. So I think outside of just singing in worship and praising the Lord, I think friendship and being in relationship with people is a really great way to worship the Lord and to glorify him, which honestly leads back to kind of the heart of what worship is.
Good. Matt, what do you have to add?
Yeah, I think kind of going along with the verse you talked about, I heard a pastor talk about that there's a vertical and then a horizontal that God pours into us and then we outpour into others. And so I think, worship as it pertains to your life is like an outpouring of the Spirit. And it reflects in the things you do, the things you say, the things you believe, the things you talk about, your relationships. And just how that they, as you kind of talked about, how the fruit of your life, how it kind of you can see things grow because of how you worship Christ through what you do.
That's good. So worship happens to be one of our core values here at Mosaic. We talk about it on the weekends. We've got 4 core values, things that are very important to us and really kind of are part of the fiber of who we are as a church. And so we've got these 4 core values, which are truth, worship, community, and outreach. And so I've just pulled this up on our website as we were talking here, and I was like, it would probably be really good to kind of talk about, what our church has to say about worship. And so here's what it says. So they all kind of build off of each other. So the first one is truth. The next one is worship. And so it says, the Bible tells us the truth about who God is, and it also shows us the truth about who we are. If you know the truth about who God is, what he's done for you, and you know the truth of who you are, the only response is to worship him. And I think what's great about what we all said collectively in all kinds of different ways is that truth is not just worship, worship is not just music. And I think that's the crux of what we were trying to explain, is it's so much bigger than that. But I think a lot of times in the church world, as we just try to summarize it or just say, well, worship is just music, but it's so much more than that. It's really about our response to who God is and what he's done, right? Kaelyn, I got a question for you, because I know this, but the folks watching the video don't know about your background in worship. You even have a degree in worship. So, like, I'm looking around the table, like, I have a degree in music, but I don't have a degree in worship. Matt, you don't have a degree in music. Sam, I don't think you have a degree in worship. But Kaelyn, you have a degree in worship, and your dad is a worship leader. So you've literally been around the idea of worship your entire life. And so I'd just love to hear from you. How has that shaped your understanding of what worship really is?
Yeah, I think growing up with a dad who was in worship, I learned a lot from him. I learned how he led his people, how he led worship, his process in the whole thing. And so I went to college, and I felt like the Lord called me to do worship, and I didn't know what that meant at the time, and I didn't know if that would be my job coming out of college, but I had the opportunity to do that, and learned that there are a lot of different ways to accomplish the same thing. And so what my dad did was not necessarily the only way to do it. And in college, it taught me to form my own process. Okay, what is important to me? How do I want to lead people that are in the congregation, but also lead the volunteers and the people that are serving with me? What is the process in which I want to choose songs? Things like that. Form my own opinion, form my own process, as we would say at the university I went to, form your own philosophy for worship. And so everybody has their own philosophy, and that comes from the relationship between you and Christ. And that philosophy is different for each and every person. And so you really do have to take the time to dig in and form that. And I had a lot of help. I had a lot of professors, a lot of people around me that taught me what that looked like and poured into me and encouraged me. But yeah, so I really just think it shaped the way that I do things now, and just kind of learning all of the different options that were in front of me, not just the one that I learned growing up, although I did heed a lot of advice and things from my dad.
From your dad.
But yeah, so just kind of helped me in forming that for myself.
Awesome. Shout out to Kaelyn's dad. Matt, you talked a little bit when you were introducing yourself about being a volunteer. And so you kind of made the transition from a volunteer worship leader to staff worship leader. Talk about how that transition has impacted your view of what worship is.
Yeah, I think, when you're just leading songs on the weekend, your sort of field of view is very narrow, and it's kind of very selfish in ways where you're really just thinking about, what songs do I like? What songs do I prefer? What songs make me sound good? And so, when I came on staff, now I'm leading a team. Now there's like a direction, and not only do I have to have a direction, I have to have a direction that's in line with the mission here. And so so often, I've had to take time to see the bigger picture. There are going to be times where I sing songs that maybe not my preference, right? But if it's for the good of the church, or it's for the good of our people, I have to summon or dig deep to find that space where I can still worship God and lead people into that space. And then, now leading a team of people at this campus, where the expectation every week is, we're going to encounter Christ. And so, helping people see that big vision, and so, yeah, it's just, I think my field of view has widened drastically. But I think one of the cool things too is, because of the fact that I've only been on staff for 2 years, I still remember what it's like to be in the seats.
Yep.
And so I still have a good perspective of what it feels like as the end recipient of that worship, or being out in the crowd and hearing these kinds of songs. And so, I think I kind of have like a good idea of both worlds, and right. kind of able to bridge the gap between like our ideas and what it will be received, So it's been great.
That's good. It's a good balance because I'm probably on the other side of that because I've been doing vocational ministry now for like 25 years. And so I forget what it was like to be on that side because I've been so long in this. And so it is good to have, your perspective on our team. And I really value and appreciate that, Matt. So that's great. Let's change gears here a little bit and talk about worship as, its importance in the Christian life. So here's the question. Why is worship such an important part of the Christian life? And how does it impact our personal relationship with God? Anybody can weigh in here.
I think worship is kind of defined as like your reverence and adoration of the Lord. And the Lord calls us in the Bible to rest in his presence and to glorify him. And that is a way to glorify him. And you can't tell me when you're having a bad day and you just sit in the presence of the Lord and you just thank him for everything that he's done for you, all the blessings that you do have, you cannot tell me that you do not feel closer to the Lord and that you do not feel him there with you. And so it's like, that is how you grow. I mean, that is your personal relationship with the Lord. For me, it grows every time that I sit there and I choose to thank the Lord. And I'm not asking for anything. Yeah. Not that asking the Lord is bad, but I'm not asking for anything. I'm taking time to say, Lord, thank you. You've done so much for me. Yeah. And none of it, which is deserved. And I just want to tell you how amazing of a God you are, how amazing of a father, of a friend. And I'm just so thankful for that. I don't know. You just feel so much closer. I mean, you feel in those times, I think, is some of the best times that I feel the Lord as a father. Yeah. And I feel him and I feel close. I'm kneeling before him and I feel like he's looking at me saying, you're glorifying me and I'm grateful for that. And that's what I've called you to do. And so that's kind of how it works for me, I guess. But
that's awesome.
I'd say it's important simply because it's a commandment to do it.
That's good, man.
I mean, too often, we get wasted away, we're missing things in our life simply because it's not our preference, right? And I come from a traditional background. And so we kind of talked about it before the podcast, I had a little bit of a charismatic season in my life. And so, and it really challenged me to think about, what was worship, what's important, what are the right things to do, what has God called us to do?
Yeah.
And so, man, if you're not worshiping, if you're not genuinely giving your all in worship, you are missing a significant part of your Christian life that God has called you to do. Yeah. There are things that I talked about this from the stage actually a couple of weeks ago about there's a story right in the New Testament where the jail cell actually falls because Paul is worshiping God. And so, I kind of use that as an analogy of in your own life, there are things that are only going to shake by your praise, not by your knowledge and not by some deep, study, but by your praise of him. And that's what I think ultimately what God wants from us more than anything is to know that we will still love him and praise him even when things are difficult. And that's the thing that I think worship does more than anything. It's an opportunity when we come in on Sunday morning, no matter what we're going through, no matter the season of our life, to give God the praise that he deserves. Not based on our circumstances, but based on who he is. Yeah. And so, I just think, man, you live on what God calls us to do. Live on what the Bible tells us to do.
Yeah. I love what you say, Kaelyn, because you were talked about how, our worship in many different forms can just deepen our relationship or our appreciation of who God is. Matt, you said that worship is a command. We were commanded, to worship and we're supposed to. But I think even more than that, it's the whole reason why we exist. All of creation exists to worship and reflect God's goodness in the world. And so I feel we're fulfilling our purpose when we worship. I think that's great. Sam, I have a question for you. So a lot of the folks that are watching this probably don't know this, but you're actually a lawyer by day and a musician by night. So I guess my question for you is, how do you incorporate worship into your everyday life, even outside of the church?
So you're right. I wear a lot of different hats. I wear Sam the lawyer hat. I wear Sam the secular musician hat, and then Sam the worship leader hat. So I would say, as a lawyer, in my daily life, how I worship, is just loving on people who need to feel loved and often don't. I'm a public defender.
Yeah.
And most of my career, I've been a public defender. So I've dealt with indigent clients who are in tough situations, who I feel oftentimes don't feel lovable, don't feel loved.
Yeah.
And so as an act of worship, I really strive to make my clients who are in tough situations.
Yeah.
I strive to make them feel appreciated and loved. And I feel in doing that, I think, Matt, you kind of touched on that, is just sharing love with others is an act of worship. And so Sam the lawyer, that's how I try to do that.
Yeah.
Sam the secular musician, I have this experience every time I'm playing out somewhere. I don't know if y'all have experienced this, but living in 2024, it's expensive to live, right? And there have been months that I've made more money playing music than I've done being a lawyer.
Wow. Which is awesome. Good for you, man.
But I just get overwhelmed with thankfulness for the ability to be able to do that. And so, like last night, I was playing somewhere and I was just playing an Eric Church song, and I felt this overwhelming, just like, God, thank you so much for this ability to provide for my family and for myself by playing music. So, literally, I'll just be playing an Eric Church song, a Jimmy Buffett song, and just I'll be worshiping, singing a song
right
that's
there.
not really a
And you're maybe at a
song.
bar.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
That's so cool. That's so cool. That's awesome. I love just hearing all the different ways to worship as a lifestyle and not just the music. And I'm so glad you guys are sharing this stuff. But music is a big part of worship. And in the corporate church setting, when we use this word worship, a lot of times we're literally talking about worship songs. And so, Matt, I kind of want to talk, this might be for us, and y'all can chime in because, Kaelyn and Sam, you guys might have some feedback on this. But one of the things that I want folks to really understand or to grasp as they're watching this or listening to this episode is the intentionality that we have, at least here at Mosaic, when we're talking about like choosing the songs that we sing. So, Matt, kind of talk people through that process for selecting songs, or how we put songs together for a service or a series or whatever. Let them know like what that process looks like, and you and I can kind of talk about this. Y'all can chime in if you want.
Yeah, so we're always kind of taking input, whether it's from ourselves and the music we're listening to, and if you're out there and you're suggesting songs, we are listening to them. I promise, even if they don't make it on the set list. But basically, we take those songs and then we kind of come together. And what we do as creatives is we plan kind of the next series. And so what we're looking for is music that will tie into whatever the kind of series we're in that Brandon's preaching on. And then we're looking for some very key things, which is number one, truth. That's one of our core values. And so whatever song we sing, the lyrics need to be tied. We need to be able to look at scripture and it needs to hold, up to scrutiny. And then we're kind of thinking through something that for me that I'm always trying to think about is like, is this a song that maybe fills a niche we don't have? Maybe theologically that's something we don't talk about. Another factor might be, is this song something that our congregation needs in this season? When we're looking at the Gulf Coast and we're looking at culturally, sometimes things happen here on the coast, and is there a song that can speak to that, in this season? And as you go through seasons where there's like COVID or stuff like that, we're always trying to like think about, is this going to move the needle in someone's life? Is this the kind of song that's going to drive someone to make a difference and that they're going to be impacted by this? And so, so we sit down and we look at the series, that we plan all those sets out. We plan usually like 4 or 5 weeks out, at a time. And then, and so then we come back and, we don't just plan the sets, we evaluate the sets. And so one of the things we do at the end of every series is that we go like, did we pick the right songs? Like, did we have the right moments? Did we, did we focus on the right things? And so it's a long process. And I was telling you before, like, that's one of the things that your eyes kind of get open to when you're on this side,
on the staff side.
When you're on the staff side is just how much like intentionality goes into it. And sometimes it makes it difficult because it can get bogged down. But I do think we do at least a good job here of like really thinking through what's important and what we want our people to be saying, what we want our people to be experiencing and singing. Yeah.
Some of my favorite moments are when people will catch me in the hallway, either after a service or after a worship set. A lot of times it's like the following week or whatever, and they'll stop me and they'll be like, man, like, Brandon taught that message and then you sang that song and it was like everything just worked together.
Y'all planned it or something.
And it was like, it's almost like we planned that or something. You know what I mean? And it's like, I think for normal people, if they're not looking for that stuff, it's easy just to walk in and be like, oh, well, today we're doing these 3 songs because maybe those are Wes's favorite songs right now, or those are the songs that Matt likes or whatever. But there's a lot of work that goes into, creating a service or a flow. And, it's not anything that we do. We understand on the staff side that we're not forcing the hand of God or anything like that, or creating these moments, but we're creating space for God to work and God to move. And so God's using all those pieces and parts to do that. And so what we're doing is just trying to create an environment where God can speak to people and touch their hearts through the music, through the message, through all of that. And so it's just so fun when people like pick up on it and they catch it and they kind of see that it's like that aha moment, like, oh, those guys, they're like doing that on purpose. Those are some of my favorite moments. I want to talk a little bit. I talk a little bit with Sam and Kaelyn. I know, Matt, that this isn't something necessarily that you guys struggle with in Harrison County, but I know specifically in Ocean Springs, especially since August, we made some changes in August to the format of our services. Brandon is traveling back and forth between campuses, and so we've had to change some of the timing of things. And at the 9 a.m. service, for sure, there are lots of folks who sometimes bail out before the singing is over for the day. And so I wanted to pose this question to you guys. You guys are volunteers, but I'd love to know your thoughts on this. How do you think, that affects either the flow of the service or maybe the folks that are leaving before the service is over or before the singing is over? Like, hey, we're here for the message, but we're going to dip out for the music. What are your thoughts on that?
I would say it's kind of disruptive, right? I think a year or so ago, Brandon kind of checked us on that, and like it chilled out for a week or so, and then it kind of picked back up. But in terms of the impact that it has on you as an individual leaving, I think you're just robbing yourself of an opportunity to be enriched.
It's so good
by what the worship does. I mean, I don't know where you could be going that could have a more profound impact than just to sit and be in the presence of God and worship and experience that.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think, first of all, it affects you. And like, this is so simple. But the Lord calls us to have patience. And patience is hard. It's something that we all struggle with, I feel like, in different ways. And so it's like, if your mind is constantly on, well, I got to get my kids and I got to leave and I want to beat the traffic and I want to make sure we get it to lunch on time and so they can get a nap or whatever. It's like your mind is in such a far place from where the Lord wants you to be.
Yeah.
And you've completely at that self, even if you haven't even left the room yet, you've left the room.
Yeah.
And the Lord calls us to patience. And if you can't have patience for the last minute and a half that we have, you are, like you said, you're robbing yourself of an encounter that you could experience with the Lord. And secondly, like, it's about those around you too. I mean, as soon as you leave, you've distracted at least 3 or 4 people, and you've robbed them of an encounter with Jesus. And so it's not just about you, it's about the people around you. And I don't think if you would sit back and think about that, I don't think anybody would want to rob somebody else of a moment like that. And so I think it's really important to not just think of yourself and think of what you have to do, but think about the people around you.
Yeah. So one of the sweetest worship moments, at least I think that I can have personally, is after a message. You know, I feel like, you know, a lot of times what happens is we come into a service and we come in kind of cold, you know, like we need to like kind of warm up to the room or to the day, you know what I mean, to church service or whatever. So we sing a few songs and then we're kind of at that point where we're ready to receive, you know, whether it's the message, whatever. But that 9 a.m. service, what's interesting is everything is kind of flipped on its head. We come in, we'll do like a song, but then Brandon gets up and teaches. And what I love about that is like God's word creates a framework. And so in those services, and this is how you do your services, Matt, I think you could probably chime in and agree on this, but I love that the message creates a framework and then we do music after the message, and it's like my worship is so much better because now I have this framework that is built, and I'm like, now I really have been warmed up. I've really been able to experience God's presence through the teaching of the word. I hear the truth. I'm being changed and transformed by the truth, and now I have an opportunity to worship and respond to what I've just heard. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the only version of service that we know at Harrison County right now.
That's how you guys are doing it every week.
You know, when we started, it was, we had the exact same services.
Right.
So, you know, most of the time it would be 3 songs up front. But yeah, I think that has played a significant role in how I see people responding, is that, you know, because of the message, and Brandon's already kind of given them the 1-2 punch, you know.
Yeah.
We're able to kind of come up and then like bring that home. You know, we're able to, you know, usually you're going to leave your more sensitive songs out back. And so, you know, I see people like, man, I just see people getting at it. I mean, even myself, there are times, you know, when we led Build My Life a couple of weeks ago, like I was battling because I'm listening to the message too, and I'm being moved by it. Yeah. And then, you know, leading that song out to the back, like it was a struggle for me just to make it through the service. And so, yeah, it makes a huge difference. One of the things I want to mention though is, you guys talked about like how it impacts you and how it impacts maybe even the other people in the service. I know a lot of people are leaving and then they're going to get their kids. You know, as a father, like you're robbing your children. Something that's one of the biggest draws for me to this church was like, I knew that my kids are being taught about the truth of the word.
That's great.
And so, yeah, when you're trying to just beat the traffic, man, like your kids need to hear the truth of the gospel. And so, yeah, just for the sake of mentioning that, you know, like my wife, she's on the team with me. And so there are weeks when she comes in and, you know, she's got the kids on stage with her, and then she leads worship and the kids are in Mo Kids like most of the day. And then she's, you know, thereafter and picks them up, you know. So if the thing is, oh, you know, where they're just getting tired or they're just worn out, like that's not an excuse. Like your kids can make it. And ultimately, I love what you said, Sam, like what is a better place for them to be right now? Like at home taking a nap or hearing about the truth of God's word and how it should impact their lives even at 6 and, you know, my kids' age 6 and 2. So yeah, it's important.
It's great.
Yeah, and I think with that, like, I think let that empower you. Like you have influence. Like you either have influence to show the people around you, hey, like I'm going to stand here and I'm going to worship and I'm going to encounter Jesus, or hey, I'm going to dip, and that gives other people permission to dip.
Yeah.
And it's like you have all of the influence. You might not think that you do. I think a lot of the times we are so conditioned to think, well, my life doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And like nobody's watching me. Everybody's watching you. People that you don't know are watching you, and they take their permissions off of what you do.
Yeah, I think the PS to that is like a lot of people think that the worship leader is the guy on the stage, and they forget that they actually have an opportunity, like you're saying, Kaelyn, to lead worship for the people that are around them. I mean, like, I'm intentional about challenging members of our team. Like, hey, when you show up and you're not serving on a Sunday, don't forget that you're also leading worship for the people that are around you. But normal people on a Sunday morning are that way too. If they're not engaging in the worship or they're choosing not to participate, they may be influencing the people around them and robbing them from that moment.
I watch people around me far more than I think I watch the stage. And I think that's true of a lot of people. I think, and they take their permissions off of it. I've seen rooms where everybody is just straight face, and everybody's that way because who wants to be the first one? But it's like once the first one cracks and once the first one decides, hey, I don't really care what anybody else thinks and I'm just going to worship the Lord because that's what I'm called to do and that's what I'm led to do. It's amazing just to see the eruption in the room of people being like, okay, they did it. I feel like I could do that now.
We should change our titles, Matt. We're no longer worship leaders because worship leaders are people in the seats. We're worship guides. I don't know. What would you call it? I don't know. Something different.
What's that thing on the mountain, like a Sherpa or whatever?
There you go. Yeah, worship Sherpas.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you a little name tag, Matt. It'll be great. All right. We are going to transition, turn the corner here just a little bit because I think a lot of times people, when they think about quote unquote worship, they think about it as like, that's something that I do on Sunday. And we hit on this a little bit, but I want to kind of camp out on this idea because worship is not just a Sunday thing. And so I guess my question is, how would you guys encourage people to think about worship as a daily practice rather than something that they only do on Sundays?
I think step one in that process is doing what you said and recognizing the fact that, hey, worship is not just a Sunday thing. All right. And then once your mind has grasped that, just allowing yourself to kind of be creative and say, all right, what in my life, what does worship look like? So I mentioned what in my day-to-day life, what that looks like.
Yeah.
I would just challenge folks to take an inventory of what their day looks like and say, okay, with what my average day looks like, how can I worship? How can I spread God's love? How can I embrace God's love and be thankful for God's love just in the normal process of my daily life? And I think that if we accepted that challenge, we would find it to be very fruitful.
It's good.
I'm going to use our students as an example. So a lot of the times we'll ask them, what is worship? And I think, honestly, a lot of adults are probably guilty of not really knowing how to define what worship is outside of we sing on a Sunday morning and we lead worship, we sing at worship at church. And so first of all, define what worship is for you. Like, dig into the word, see what the Lord says about what worship is, what that looks like. But I mean, worship is one of the things, and I think one of the broader umbrellas is glorifying the Lord. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of ways to do that. There's a lot of ways to accomplish that. And we tell our students, you are at a school and you are around people 24/7. Mm-hmm. You are around people 24/7. You're in the grocery store, you're at work, you're in any of those things. And you have such an innate opportunity. One of the ways that the Lord is most glorified is by making his disciples. And you have such an innate opportunity to interact with those around you and to share Jesus. And that doesn't mean that you have to go up to somebody and just say, hey, do you know Jesus Christ? Can I tell you about him?
Yeah.
That sometimes that's the case. And great on you for having the boldness to be able to do that. But sometimes it just means a smile. And sometimes it just means a hello or a how are you doing? Or a friend who probably would say that they believe in the Lord but doesn't have a relationship. Hey, how can I pray for you? What's going on in your life?
Right.
And just simply being a friend, caring, and interacting with those around you. I mean, strangers should not be strangers to us. As believers, we should meet no stranger.
Right.
Because everybody is a child of the Lord, and we should be able to interact with anybody we come into contact with, because that is how we show the love of Christ, and that's how we are his hands and feet. And so I think just the simple things, I think, yes, define in your life, what does it look like to worship? What are some tangible ways I can do that? But something that we literally all experience 24/7 every day is we interact with people.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way to do it.
That's good.
Yeah. I think, God is not just a piece, or being a Christian is not just a piece of your life. God is the lens in which we view life. And so, whether you're an employee, whether you're a student, whether you're a mother, whether you're a sibling, no matter what you do, God says everything you do for the glory of God. And so to worship him is in every interaction and everything you do. Ask yourself, man, is this drawing my affections for Jesus, or is this drawing me away from Jesus? And then the bigger question is, am I drawing others towards Jesus with these conversations or with my actions, or am I drawing people away from God with my actions and with what I'm saying? I mean, I think if you keep it as simple as that, as saying God is the most important thing, and there is nothing that's more important than this, and keeping that frame of reference. We used to say at my old church, we used to tell our students having a heavenly mindset, and so everything is referenced in the frame of, am I trying to get other people to come to heaven with me, or am I more concerned about the things that are on earth?
Yeah. Wow. I'm going to double down on this, Matt, because you talked a little bit about your time as a volunteer before coming to the staff side, but most people probably don't know what you did, what your job was before your job became to quote unquote lead worship. But you operated heavy equipment over at Chevron. And so I know that there's probably a lot of folks that are watching this podcast or listening to this episode that might be in a similar field or whatever, and they feel like, how can I worship in my work? I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you would respond to that, and maybe some of the things that you put into practice as you were literally operating a crane over there at Chevron.
What's so crazy to think about that time of my life is I started that job not a Christian. And by the time I left it, I knew I was called to ministry. And that was a 7-year time frame. And so the rare few that had seen me from the beginning got to see me from the unashamed sinner to at least trying to live somewhat according to this book that we've all agreed that is the way to live. And so I think one of the things just to say out front is, man, I didn't always do it right. Even when I was getting closer to, like, I know I'm called to ministry and all this and that, like, I blew it a lot. And so, but that didn't, I didn't let the guilt and shame of my sin stop me from the mission of God. And so I think one of the big things is, when we talk about worship, we talk about Sundays and we talk about music and all this kind of stuff, you can't approach your job on empty. You're not going to get far driving on empty. And so you have got to daily, particularly on Sunday, you've got to be full of the Spirit, so that when you go and interact with people, for me, interacting with people outside of Christianity was a constant drain, because either they were looking for a reason to cut me down so that they didn't have to, I guess, feel guilt about the things that were going on in life, or just the reality is that being around sinful people, just, man, sometimes it was a struggle. The things that they talked about, the things they celebrated, the things that was important. It was a struggle to be a part of these conversations. And that's one of the things I think of the most is, Paul talks about is like being in the world, but not of the world. One of the things I want to make clear, to you at home and is to remember, man, God has called you to be a part of it, but to stand out from it. And so, I think in one way it's like, you do need to be prepared and you do need to be Spirit-filled and all these things, but you also can't be so holy as to stay away from people who God's called you to go reach. These sinful people are the very people that need you the most. And I think that's the kind of thing that kept me in a good perspective. And when it got really hard, when there was like weeks or months where, especially like when I felt like I'm called to ministry, God, why are you still holding me back? What's going on? I had to just keep in my mind, like, man, I'm in the mission field right here. Like, there's no greater opportunity than these people right in front of you, to tell them about the truth of Jesus, to tell them that there's a better life for them. I had conversations with guys who could not believe that I had not had an affair in my, 7 years of being married or 8 years of being married. I had guys that couldn't believe that, like, I didn't care about getting drunk on the weekends or just taking part of all these things because that's their standard. Like, that's their normal. And so this is your opportunity, man. You get to, and here's the thing that some of these people are great. Most of these people are great. I mean, you get some of the best conversations and the best relationships I have were born out of this place, and people I still talk to today. And so, yeah, it's you've got to keep yourself spirit-filled, but you got to keep yourself on mission.
Yeah.
Think about our mission here. Mm-hmm. Our mission is to reach broken people with the truth of Jesus. Right. And so, man, if you find yourself at work wanting to abstain or I'm going to stay away from all that. No, God's called you to be a part of it, but just don't partake in it. There's a difference,
I love what you said, and it just created an analogy of like folks coming on the weekend maybe or in their daily walk, filling the tank so that they're ready to interact with people maybe outside of the faith and be light and love of Jesus. I love that. I love that idea. Well, Sam, we heard a little bit from you about being in the courtroom and even your time as a musician in the community, playing out at gigs and stuff. But Kaelyn, one of the things that we didn't talk about was, we talked a little bit about your degree in worship, but you actually spent some time in higher education, like working for the college. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about how you were able to live a life of worship maybe in that setting.
Yeah, so I had a really great privilege to go to a Christian university, University of Mobile, and I spent 3 years getting my degree, and then I guess the joke is always, I guess they liked me, so they kept me around. And I actually got to work in the department that I got my degree from, so our arts department. And my job was to interact with prospective students. So I recruited them, I awarded them scholarship, I even auditioned them for the department. And so I dealt a lot with seniors in high school and their parents very heavily. And so college was such a formative part of my life. I learned what kind of person I did want to be, what kind of person I didn't want to be, what kind of leader I wanted to be and not wanted to be by watching everybody around me. And while I did have the privilege of going to a Christian university, I kind of had the opposite experience of you. I think I felt like I was surrounded by people who were just these perfect believers. And then you kind of pull the wool off of your eyes and you're like, oh, wait, like half of this campus probably doesn't have a relationship with Christ. Gotcha. They would say, hey, I believe in the Lord and like, I think he's real and I think this, the Bible is true. But walking an everyday relationship with him is just not something that is seen commonly. And so you almost have to weed through and be creative of how to find those places and find those spots and those people who need to hear not just about Jesus. They know about Jesus. I mean, we had to take classes about it. But I mean, to tell them, what is it like to have a relationship with Christ? And honestly, it was just, I even talk about it to this day. Like, it was such a privilege for me to be able to interact with students who are in such a formative part of their life. And they are literally deciding what road they want to go down. And you have such an influence of literally just sitting with them and encouraging them, praying for them, going to lunch with them. I mean, going to the calf food's nasty, but I mean, like going to the calf with them and sucking it up and eating lunch with them and just being a part of their life was just such a huge part. And I mean, even with parents, I had to interact with a lot of parents. And for parents who have sent their kids to college, it's hard from what I hear. One day I'll get there, but from what I hear, it's really hard. And I'm sure it was. I was an only child, so my parents only did it once, and I'm sure that was really rough on them. And so for me to be able to sit on the phone or sit down with a parent and put them at ease that their child is coming to a place that has not only their educational kind of part of their life in mind, but has their spiritual well-being in mind, was just, it warmed my heart. Like, I loved sitting down with parents and just seeing just the tension rise off and just being able to encourage them that we care about their child far past their grades. We care about their spiritual journey. We care about what they're going through. They're more, one of UM's sayings is, you're more than just a number. Sure. You're a name. You are a life, and your eternity matters to us. And so to be able to work in a place like that, yes, I felt like I had to be a little bit more creative of how to weed out how do I specifically worship? Because it's really easy to, I think, kind of fall back and not think about your decisions as much because you are in a place that is surrounded by a lot of believers. And I think you shirk sometimes feeling comfortable. And I think when you're around non-believers, you're on your best behavior and you're, you know, really trying your hardest to show them Jesus. And so I think it taught me, like, I always have to be aware of the way that I act, the words that I say, how I'm portraying myself, because how I portray myself is how I portray Jesus. And so, kind of learning that and being creative with how to share more about who Jesus is, not just the basics, but more and deeper into who he is with students who are forming a lot of who they are at the moment. So
That's great. That's great. Such good insights. I really appreciate each and every one of you for being here and being willing to have a conversation with us about what worship is and what worship isn't. I really hope that you guys as well that tuned in found this very helpful and insightful. We would love to invite you back as we kick off our brand new series called Worship, It's More Than You Think. It kicks off Thursday, October the 31st right here in OS, and then again in Harrison County in Ocean Springs on Sunday, November the 3rd. We will see you guys. Thanks again for tuning in.
You've been listening to The Loop, a podcast by Mosaic Church. For more information, visit us online at mosaicgc.com.